You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. And welcome to Spookulative Evolution.
Hello, Will.
David.
Impressive. Well done. And hello, everybody. And welcome back to Spook-E 2025. Spook-E is our annual series throughout October where we choose monsters of myth and popular fiction and discuss how something like that might evolve in the real world on the Earth family tree of life under the real world conditions of biology and evolution. This year, our spooky theme has been Monsters of Nintendo. This is the fourth and final episode of our spooky series. For the month of October, there will be one bonus episode of Cute-E the first weekend in November, and then we will also have a spooky live stream on November 8th on YouTube for anybody to join. Come and check it out and chat with us.
Yes.
So far this year, we have done piranha plants, Octoroks, and Kremlings. And, as usual, we like to save the weirdest choice for last. This episode, we are tackling Metroids.
I'm so excited.
This was the choice. When we sat down together to discuss this year's Spooky, and I listed, here are my candidates for the different episodes. And I said, and I think we put Metroids at episode 4, and Will said, obviously. Yes, yep. They are the perfect choice for the 4th episode.
Well, it's like they're such an iconic video game monster.
Yes.
And are, by design, extremely alien and otherworldly.
Yes. Metroids are the titular monsters of the Metroid franchise, starring bounty hunter Samus Aran. They are also different from our previous 3 creatures in a couple of ways. One, they are the first one this series that is actually scary creatures.
Yes.
Metroids are extremely unsettling. And number 2, whereas the other monsters we've done so far tend to be relatively minor, inconsequential, run-of-the-mill baddies, Metroids are extremely consequential. They are the focus of the story for their games, and they tend to be final boss battles.
Yes.
And in light of that, I'm going to put a rare case for Spooky, just a mild spoiler warning at the top of this episode. I'm not going to go out of my way to spoil cool stuff from the Metroid games, but we will be discussing plot details. So there will be some of that in this episode. As usual, we're going to do a deep dive through the lore of the Metroids as creatures, and then we will use what we learned to speculate upon their hypothetical evolution. Metroids make their first appearance in the game Metroid for the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1986. The story of Metroid is that the Galactic Federation, because there is always a Galactic Federation, has been exploring a mysterious planet called SR-388 and have discovered these alien life forms that they've called Metroids and have identified that they are extremely dangerous. They then get attacked by space pirates, because there are always space pirates, and the space pirates steal a Metroid and take it back to their homeworld. This makes the Galactic Federation extremely uncomfortable. They're worried that the space pirates are going to weaponize the Metroids somehow because they're inherently very dangerous. So they call renowned galactic bounty hunter, because there is always a renowned galactic bounty hunter, Samus Aran, and her mission, and the player's mission in the first game, is to follow the space pirates to their home planet of Zebes, defeat the space pirates, and destroy any Metroids that she finds.
Man, people in space really got to learn that when you come across a planet with 2 letters and 3 numbers as its name, and you find an alien organism on it, just leave it alone.
Don't touch it. Just don't go there. In this game, we get our first look at Metroids. Actually, you get your first look at Metroids late in the game, because Metroids tend to be later game encounters, because they are extremely dangerous. Metroids are sort of jellyfish-like in appearance. They have that sort of dome shape like the head of a jellyfish. It is transparent and you can see organs through it. In Metroids, they're kind of like brain and neuron-like structures.
Yeah.
The Metroids themselves tend to be green or blue. They don't have any other organs visible, so there's no eyes, there's no mouth that you can see. Again, like a jellyfish. They're also, in my notes, I have described them as cat-sized. They're not huge, but they're, they're smaller than Samus, but they're still like, bobcat or medium-sized dog-sized.
Yeah.
Whereas a jellyfish has the dome shape and then tentacles underneath, a Metroid does not have tentacles, but instead 2 pairs of short claw-like structures, one of which is larger and is described as being for grasping onto prey, and the smaller pair is for feeding.
Gotcha. Okay.
Metroids move by floating around in the air. Sometimes they are depicted as doing that jellyfish-like up and down movement.
Oh yeah, that pulsating.
Yeah, they can move quite fast, but, and this is something that has been described in game text, there is no visible means of propulsion. It is not clear how Metroids move through the air.
Interesting.
The most notorious thing about Metroids is how they feed. Metroids feed by latching onto prey, usually onto the head, and draining energy out of their victims. This is another one of those mysterious, interesting features of Metroid. Again, in the games, it is repeatedly mentioned. It is not clear what exactly it is they're draining, because they're not draining blood or fluids or anything. A victim's body is pretty much fully intact, just dead. Sometimes victims are drained of color, but it's really just their energy has been sapped. Metroids are also depicted in various games as being able to absorb radiation or to drain the energy from technology, from machines.
Okay.
So what exactly they're draining is intentionally mysterious in the canon of the games.
Creepy.
There are also some cases where they're shown to be able to share the energy that they've drained or have it drained from them. That a Metroid can act as like a battery and you could drain the energy out of them.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, whereas most of the baddies we've talked about so far are common and weak, Metroids are rare and extremely strong. They are quick. They also, so in Metroid, most of the bad guys that you encounter are normal video game baddies. They hit you, you lose a chunk of health, and that's that. When you encounter a Metroid, my first experience encountering Metroids was in Super Metroid, and you get toward the end of the game, and you meet a Metroid, and you go, that's a Metroid, and it swoops over and latches onto your head, and then your health meter just starts rapidly counting down. And it's terrifying. Metroids do a ton of damage very quickly. They are also resistant to basically all weaponry. The only way that you can defeat them is by freezing them with your ice beam. Metroids are consistently described as being vulnerable to cold. That cold either makes them sluggish or outright hurts them. So in Metroid and in most Metroid games, the way you defeat them is you freeze them with the ice beam, and then while they're frozen, you shoot them with 5 missiles.
Jeez.
They are intentionally very hard to defeat.
Whoa, that's I knew Metroids were like, they're the titular creature, and I knew they were a big deal to the lore, but I always assumed the little jellyfish ones were fodder, where you take them out and then there's bigger ones later and stuff, is usually video game based. I didn't know these were that tough.
Yeah, they're in a lot of the Metroid games. When you start encountering Metroids, things are getting serious.
Jeez, awesome.
Metroids have been described as both, I've seen them described both as semi-intelligent and very intelligent. Okay. So exactly how smart they are is unclear. They are shown to be able to recognize threats. There is at least one instance in Metroid 2 where Metroids have destroyed the statue that holds the ice beam, seemingly recognizing that it is a threat to them. There's also instances where Metroids will swoop in to protect an ally. So there is some amount of group intelligence. And very critically to the plot of the first Metroid, the space pirates discover that if you expose Metroids to beta rays, it causes them to divide and multiply.
Okay.
So by the time Samus gets to them on Zebes in Metroid, the space pirates have been breeding Metroids and have been splitting them in this way.
Cool.
By the end of Metroid, spoilers, Samus wins and defeats the space pirates. In Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, the Galactic Federation has continued investigating SR-388 and has decided that Metroids are so dangerous that they must all be destroyed. So Samus's mission this game is to travel to SR-388 and kill every Metroid on the planet.
Leave nothing alive.
And leave nothing behind, just destroy everything. Shortly after arriving to SR-388, Samus encounters her first Metroid, but before she can do anything to it, it sinks to the ground and undergoes metamorphosis.
Ooh.
It leaves behind the husk in the shape of the original Metroid, and a new form emerges. It is this game that reveals that the jellyfish shape are the larval stage of Metroids.
Cool.
Over the course of the game, you encounter the subsequent life stages of the Metroid life cycle, starting with the larvae, and then alpha Metroids, gamma Metroids, zeta Metroids, and omega Metroids.
I'm so happy right now. This is awesome.
It's so cool. Over the course of their development, they develop an exoskeleton, limbs, mandibles, compound eyes. They become much more arthropod-like, and then later on a little bit more reptilian. And they always retain that jellyfish-like membrane on the underside of the body.
Yeah, you can still see that core visible.
Yes. The alpha Metroids are sort of beetle-like, with a carapace on the back and the membrane underneath. They have large mandibles and small legs that they don't appear to use. Gamma Metroids are much more spider-like. They're more heavily armored, and they have 4 big, large, spindly insect legs. Zeta Metroids are a bit more reptilian, a bit more humanoid in their appearance. They are bipedal, or at least capable of walking around on 2 legs. They have a long tail. Their limbs are much more like vertebrate arms and legs. They've got big claws, and they still have that membrane on the chest. And then Omega Metroids are large, bipedal, strong, and slow. They are like big hulking monster Metroids.
Cool.
In the original Metroid 2, all 4 of these stages are shown to float around in the air. In the remake, Samus Returns, the Alpha Metroids float, Gamma Metroids alternate between floating and crawling around on the ground. Zeta Metroids don't float, but they can crawl around like on walls and ceilings. And Omega Metroids can only walk on the ground. So they gradually lose mobility over the course of their development.
Gotcha.
In those games, they variously also will damage Samus by running into her. In the later game, they will actively bite with the mandibles or swipe with the claws. They also all variously show the ability to produce fire or electricity as offensive maneuvers. And Zeta Metroids in Samus Returns can also spit acid. So they've got a bunch of these offensive capabilities. Unlike the larvae, the upper levels of the life stage are vulnerable to most weapons. They are very powerful. In Metroid 2, every Metroid is basically a mini boss battle. You just go from mini boss battle to mini boss battle fighting all these Metroids. They are, however, all extra vulnerable to ice weapons.
Okay.
And the membrane on their underside is their weak spot. Also, notably, a couple quick little notes. Gamma Metroids in Samus Returns apparently can create a gelatinous web-like substance that seems that like they're making a nest around themselves.
Cool.
And none of the upper life stages appear to absorb life energy from their prey.
All right.
That is something that the larvae do, but the upper stages just have mandibles and presumably just eat like normal creatures.
Yeah.
This is the extended life cycle of Metroids, that the larvae gradually progress through these stages. This is also expounded upon later in the franchise to demonstrate that this seems to only be capable in the conditions of their homeworld. When they are taken to other planets, they don't go through this metamorphosis.
That's very interesting.
Which is why you don't see any of these life stages in the original Metroid, because you're on Zebes, which is not their actual homeworld.
Yeah.
At the end of Samus's exploration through the planet SR388, she encounters the Queen Metroid. Queen Metroid is the biggest one. There is only one that she encounters typically at a time. The Queen Metroid also seems to be the only Metroid that produces offspring. Presumably, the Queen is the end of the life cycle, although it is not actually clear in-game where Queen Metroids come from. They don't see... There's no direct evidence that they metamorphose from Omega Metroids. So they might be a separate development. I'm thinking like bees. It's like one of them is chosen. Yes, you get the jelly and you become the queen.
Yes, exactly. Like the other bees can't grow up into queens.
Yes. The queen is gigantic, quadrupedal, and sort of lizard-like in the overall appearance. Big, toothy mouth, bulky body, 4 limbs, long tail. The queen has many eyes, an enormous mouth on the end of a long neck. In the original Metroid 2, the neck actually is extendable.
That's what I thought.
Extends it outward to bite at Samus.
I think I'd seen clips of that. I just didn't realize it was a Metroid. I thought it was just some alien.
Yes.
Cool.
And the queen has that membrane on the belly. That old jellyfish-like membrane. In Metroid Other M, there is official size data that describes the Queen Metroid as being 6 meters tall, so about 20 feet tall, and 11 meters long, so about 35 feet long. So a Queen Metroid is roughly the same dimensions as T-Rex.
Yes, so not bad.
The Queen attacks by biting, also with powerful roars, can spit fire and acid, and if the Queen swallows you, it can absorb life energy from Samus when swallowing. So it seems that that is something that the Queen can also do.
Cool.
The Queen produces eggs, which are oval and green and hatch into tiny versions of larvae that are called infants. There is, in some games, the implication that newborn Metroids imprint on the first creature that they come across.
Oh.
And the Queen Metroid does not, as far as we've seen in games, have an apparent mate, and also doesn't seem to live alongside the other life stages. So in Metroid 2, when you're exploring the planet, you encounter the other life stages separate from the Queen. The only Metroids that are nearby the Queen are larvae that have presumably recently hatched.
Okay.
So this isn't like a beehive situation where the whole colony is sort of built around and servicing the Queen. She's kind of off on her own.
Neat. Intriguing twist to it.
All of this is how the Metroid life cycle and biology functions on their home planet of SR388. When Metroids are taken off of their home planet, weird stuff happens, and they develop into unnatural strains.
Okay.
This can happen naturally, it is implied, but also bad guys in the Metroid franchise love experimenting on Metroids and creating new forms of Metroids. In Super Metroid, the space pirates create clones called Mocktroids, which are significantly weaker, so they're failed clones. In Other M, corrupt scientists, because there are always corrupt scientists, create Metroids that are resistant to cold.
Oh.
which seems like a terrible idea. And also in Super Metroid, one Metroid larva grows to a gigantic size, and it is unclear why that happened.
Okay. It ate its vegetables.
It did eat a bunch of creatures. A thing that is actually really cool, and I'm glad that I remembered this because I meant to bring it up. In the first 3 Metroid games, one of the things that is consistent is, so you're traveling through these different environments. You're deeper and deeper into the center of the planet. And the closer you get to where the Metroids are, the fewer other enemies you encounter. So you start to get closer to the Metroids and you stop encountering alien life forms. The implication being that none of them can live near the Metroids.
Yeah, they all got etted.
And then in Samus Returns, each Metroid you encounter in its own chamber. And after you defeat them, if you go back to that room, there are now minor enemies in there.
That's great.
Which is pretty cool. The most famous variations that happen with Metroids take place when they are exposed to a radioactive substance called phazon. This is the core principle behind the Metroid Prime series. In Metroid Prime, the first one, we are introduced to Talon Metroids, which develop from Metroid larvae on the planet Talon 4.
Mm-hmm.
Talon Metroids are mostly normal Metroids, although they are described as growing in size after feeding. And they don't develop into their normal SR388 life stages, but instead they develop into Hunter Metroids.
Oh.
Which are tall, sort of squid-shaped, with a tall mantle, longer mandibles, and 2 squid-like tentacles that they can siphon energy through those tentacles.
Okay.
So the Hunter Metroids are dangerous because they can siphon energy at a distance. They can reach out with those tentacles.
Cool.
Also on Talon 4, there are Fission Metroids, which, after you damage them enough, they split into 2 different Metroids, each of which has a different vulnerability to energy types.
Huh.
Which, for the purposes of the game, means they split and then you have to swap weapons to defeat the resulting Metroids based on what color they are.
Yes.
Fission Metroids, also the worst. Absolutely. Anytime I see Fission Metroids, I am unhappy.
Yeah, it sounds like a pain.
They're a real pain in the butt. In later Metroid Prime games, we also encounter Phazon Metroids, which appear to be Talon Metroids that have been exposed to even more Phazon.
Gotcha.
The Phazon Metroids have sort of a split membrane, so kind of like the 2 hemispheres of a brain, the shape of that jellyfish mantle. They have huge fangs, and they can become intangible by warping their position in space.
Like you do.
Phazon Metroids develop from tiny infant versions that fly around in flocks. And Phazon Metroids can develop into one of 2 mature forms. Metroid Hatchers, which are, again, tall, with a very armored exoskeleton around them, 4 long tentacles. They cannot phase like the Phazon Metroids, but they can spawn new Phazon Metroids.
Cool.
The other option are Hopping Metroids, which have a small armored body, kind of spider-like in appearance, with a small armored body, 4 large legs. They do not fly or phase, but they slash with their claws, and they can spit Phazon.
Oh, interesting.
So Phazon, this substance Phazon, is shown to have all sorts of effects on the life cycle and biology of the Metroids. They're not unique to that. The Space Pirates also experiment with exposing themselves to Phazon, and it does all sorts of wacky stuff to them. Samus in Metroid Prime gets a Phazon suit.
Oh, yeah.
A coating of her power suit that is Phazon powered.
Cool. It's the gamma radiation The Marvel gamma radiation of the Metroid world.
Yes, absolutely. And then the ultimate expression of the Phazon mutated Metroids are Metroid Prime.
Hey, that's what
Metroid. That's the name of the movie. Metroid Prime is the final boss of Metroid Prime.
Mm-hmm.
Said to have developed due to extreme exposure to Phazon, although the details are unclear in the game. Metroid Prime is absolutely enormous. Again, kind of spider or crab-like in appearance, with a tall central body that is armored with barbs and spikes coming off the carapace, huge crab-like legs, and right in the middle of the body is its exposed face, which is its only weak spot. Metroid Prime attacks with various beams and missiles and ice breath. It also has like a tractor beam kind of ability that pulls Samus in close, and it can slash with its limbs. In the original release of Metroid Prime, it is implied in-game that Metroid Prime assimilated weapons and defense systems from the Space Pirates.
Oh, okay.
Which might explain why it's able to shoot missiles and stuff. Although that seems to have been changed in later releases, so it is unclear if that is actually considered canon these days.
Huh.
Also, in Metroid Prime 3, it is implied that there have been multiple Metroid Primes, so who knows what's going on. When Metroid Prime is defeated, there is a final phase of the boss battle where the exoskeleton releases its core. The Metroid Prime core is a big floating entity made of Phazon energy. It is blue and transparent and is basically a big alien face with long tendrils coming out of it.
Yup. Weird.
The Metroid Prime core releases waves of energy, can turn invisible, produces Phazon, and can spawn other Metroids, including fission Metroids, which is one of the reasons why I hate them so much.
Yeah. No, that's awful.
So this seems to be... The Metroid Prime really is the extent of Metroid where it starts to lose some of that physical, tangible form. And in that final form, it is just this Phazon being.
Yes. It's a space ghost.
And then it gets weird. So, when Metroid Prime... Spoilers for the end of Metroid Prime. When Metroid Prime is defeated, it collapses into a blue pulsating blob, and as a last-ditch effort, it reaches out to Samus to try to save itself, and ends up absorbing the Phazon suit components from her, leaving her with her normal power suit without the Phazon suit aspect of it. This does not immediately appear to do anything to help Metroid Prime, and Samus leaves and the day is saved. But it is later revealed that Metroid Prime used the Phazon suit along with Samus's DNA that was present within the suit to build itself a new body, and that is Dark Samus.
Right. Okay.
Dark Samus is basically the Phazon energy being of Metroid Prime inside the Phazon suit. And as Dark Samus, it has all of Samus's abilities. It is also extremely intelligent and positively evil.
It's downright nasty.
So the Metroid rabbit hole goes deep. Sort of the final form of the Phazon Metroid continuum is an evil, dark version of Samus.
I love lore like this where it's very much the comic book situation of, so the character that is currently Iron Man is actually a clone of, and the suit they're wearing is actually an alternate dimension suit that they got when they were teaming up with someone. And it's just like, the layer upon layer of crazy additions. Like, this is already a mutated Metroid that took a final ghost form and then fused with her armor that was also mutated. And
when they released Dark Samus for Smash Brothers Ultimate, I remember I looked up. I was like, well, who is Dark Samus? And I tried to look it up. and the first entry that came up must have just been a wiki article, and I read the first paragraph and gave up.
Yeah. None of that made sense.
None of this makes sense to me. So now I understand who Dark Samus is, and so do you. Now, later on in the games, there is one more major twist to be revealed, and that is the origins of the Metroids.
Yeah.
It is ultimately revealed that Metroids were not naturally evolved creatures. They were created by an ancient race of bird people called the Chozo. The Chozo are also the people, that's where Samus gets all of her cool superpowers from.
Yes.
The Chozo, once upon a time, lived on SR-388, and while there, they were attacked by dangerous creatures that they called X-parasites. Unable to defeat the X-parasites, they created Metroids to be a worse predator that they could hopefully control. So they created Metroids to wipe out the X-parasites, and then that didn't turn out well for the Chozo, because that never turns out well for whoever it is that's trying to do that.
Yep.
What this means is, after the events of Metroid 2, when Samus wiped out all the Metroids from SR-388, the X-parasites resurfaced, with their predators gone. This is the plot of Metroid Fusion.
Gotcha.
Samus returns to SR-388, gets attacked and infected by an X-parasite, and in an attempt to save her life, doctors quickly put together a vaccine using Metroid DNA that they had in storage. And because this is a science fiction franchise, what the vaccine does is it incorporates Metroid DNA into Samus's DNA, which makes her immune to the X-parasites and also makes her vulnerable to cold.
Yeah.
Which is a feature that she has retained ever since.
Huh.
It is described in the game that over time, as that Metroid DNA within her continues to advance, she could acquire more Metroid features, and that she might eventually become a Metroid, or that she might already be considered a Metroid, because she has that Metroid DNA within her.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that, but it is not directly relevant for our discussion today, and it's awesome. So just go play Metroid Dread. But the upshot of all of this is that after the events of the Metroid Prime franchise, Metroid 2, and then Super Metroid, Metroids are considered extinct in the universe. All of the Metroids have been wiped out. The only living Metroid is said to be Samus herself.
Fascinating.
Which is pretty cool.
That's really interesting.
So, Metroids are extremely weird. This has been a fun one to put together because A, the Metroid lore is fascinating, but also we both knew very little about Metroids when we chose them for Spook-E, and we were like, these are going to be so weird. And we had no idea.
No, yeah. This is so much more than what I was expecting.
Metroids are so weird. This is a great time for our magic disclaimer, which is before we get into our speculating, we can only use biology to create natural and not supernatural or magical things. So a energy being that is a floating head that is made out of phazon energy is probably beyond our capacity to develop. Also, half the other stuff that I described. That's not how vaccines work. So we're going to do our best to come up with something somewhat Metroid-like.
Yeah.
Our task is to figure out where on the known tree of life something like Metroids might develop, and what conditions might lead to the evolution of Metroid-like creatures.
Yeah, and I had an idea early on just looking at base larval Metroids, because they look to me like ostracods, which are, for anyone that's not familiar, little ocean like water crustaceans. Many of them form this very round body with two big, very visible, giant compound eyes that are inside this body. And They basically, like, if you just Google ostracod, the first image that came up for me is very Metroid. Round body, translucent shell with two big round organs visible in it and nothing else. And I believe those big eyes are because they are predatory and they catch fish in the dark water. But that's just the larval form.
But then the other 80% of what I explained.
Yeah. The later phases are so very much not just a crustacean.
I do think that... So the marine realm is very tempting because, number one, Metroids float. And this is a very easy excuse to get around that. But also, this idea of a complex life cycle is very common in marine organisms. And Metroid larvae not only look like jellyfish, but that sort of Medusa shape, that life stage, is something we see in a variety of different ocean invertebrates that have a young... So the way that corals work and the way that a lot of like Hydra work this way is they have a floating larval stage that is sometimes jellyfish-like, and then eventually they settle down and form a stationary, grounded adult stage.
Yes, and even a lot of jellyfish go through a similar cycle, but when they settle down, that then produces the actual baby jellyfish that will grow in size. So the larva floats around, then settles, becomes kind of a little anemone thing, but instead of sitting and eating, it pops off a bunch of cloned baby jellyfish that then swim and feed and get bigger.
We also have some animals today, like eels, that do go through several stages in their life cycle, that depending on what that stage is doing. And of course, we have insects today that have different castes, they're often called, within a colony. So that's not quite, worker ants don't develop into soldier ants necessarily.
Yes.
But you do start with larvae and then they give rise to a variety of different forms that have different jobs within the colony.
And there are some ants that will shift between roles as they age. Young do a different job than the elder ants and fully mature ants.
You also have fish that will take on different roles. So obviously there's eels that go through their life cycles, like I mentioned, but you also have a bunch of fish that, for example, when they reach a certain age, become a female form or a male form that now functions differently.
Yes. The other idea that comes to mind to me, so like larval stages and complicated life cycle, absolutely an option. Another thing that comes to mind is, so the larvae are parasitic. That's their whole thing.
They're described as variously as parasites or predators. And technically, they do latch on and completely destroy their victim.
Yes.
So they're really towing the line in between those two things.
So they are going to be feeding off of other organisms somehow. And the latching, for us in the real world, latching on and feeding on is a very... especially if you're starting out as itty bitty babies, you'll be parasites because you're not big enough to kill anything too much larger than you. But there are plenty of predatory larvae. The other idea that comes to mind, though, is if they are parasitic, all of the later stages have a visible Metroid core, and that brings to mind for me the parasitic barnacle that sits on the underbelly of a crab and takes it over and modifies it to better suit its needs.
I wasn't sure where you were going with this. I really because that, oh man. So that would imply, potentially, that the larva is a barnacle-like parasite. The alpha, gamma, zeta, and omega stages are potentially the life stages of a different organism.
Yep. Or organisms that it passes between. It could be different ones that it moves through. like lancet flukes and stuff move through different hosts.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And then the queen could either be a final host that it parasitizes and then uses to reproduce, or the queen could just be the adult stage of what the larvae actually are.
Yes.
Which would be why there doesn't seem to be a direct connection between the queen Metroid and the other life stages.
Yeah, and the queen's just pumping out larvae, throwing them out into the ocean or wherever, and they're doing their thing separately.
I also like the idea that the different life stages could also be changes that the parasite induces.
Yes, exactly.
In the host. So that those barnacles that parasitize crabs, one of the things that they do, so the whole idea, the way that those barnacles work, we've talked about this. Also, there's a SciShow episode about parasites. Go find it somewhere.
It's fantastic.
They infect the brood area, like this area underneath the belly of the crab, where the crab would normally keep its eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And the barnacle tricks the crab into taking care of the barnacle as though it is eggs. And then when it's time for the barnacle to spawn, it tricks the crab into helping to disperse the larvae like it would its own young. But one of the things that the barnacle will do, if it infects a male crab that does not have that anatomy and behavior, is the barnacle will induce the crab to become female.
Yeah.
So that it will then have all of the tools and instincts to care for the barnacle as it would its own eggs.
It's the most horrifying hormone treatment ever.
So the idea that these could also be changes that the parasite itself is inducing is A, very fun, and B, satisfyingly, fittingly horrifying for Metroids.
Oh, yeah. Very body horror. I also like this because then it would explain why when outside of its natural environment, it doesn't show these life stages because its hosts aren't there.
Yeah.
The hosts it has specialized and evolved to parasitize and manipulate aren't there. So you just have a larva living its entire lifespan in larval stage, and you get these other mutations and these other adaptations with just the larval stage, but no, similar forms to what you see in their home environment.
Yeah. So now I'm picturing larvae floating around like jellyfish, and then maybe they infect some sort of crustacean or something like that.
Yes, some other floating thing.
Yes, and I'm picturing that the Alpha Metroid is that, and it induces like the big mandibles, because those are preposterously oversized mandibles that don't make a lot of sense unless somebody else is making them happen. And then when it's time to find the next host, the parasite induces the alpha form to shift into the gamma form, which has those big those big legs, and maybe it uses those to go, for example, out onto the land to find the next host. And then the same thing happens. It infects some lizard-like thing that is the Zeta form, that then it induces to shift into the Omega form before whatever the last thing it has to do is. So it goes through two different hosts, and in each one, it induces a change. And then you get the 4 stages.
I like that a lot.
It also very nicely explains why the Alpha and Gamma are visually very similar, and then the Zeta and Omega are visually very similar.
Yes. Well, and then I like that it means that while the larvae are preying or parasitizing on life forms, it's, they still have to survive until they find their ideal host. So they're just eating other plankton and larval fish and just latching on in a similar way they will to their host, but they aren't able to attach. So they just feed off of it until that host dies and then keep floating. And eventually when they latch on and it's the right organism, they go, step 2, and ingrain themselves into the anatomy.
This is the most horrible creature we've ever created.
It's so
Spook-E,
awful.
Also, thinking back to the Metroid, the description of Metroids is that they are not draining blood or anything. And they are draining some sort of mysterious energy. Now, we could just ignore that because it's magic.
Yes.
But I'm also wondering if could it be that they are like pulling nutrients?
Yes.
Or like the food, like they're blocking, they're doing what a lot of like tapeworms will do, where it is tapping into the system of the host and just siphoning the food or nutrition that it's garnering from its diet into the parasite.
Exactly.
So it starves to death rather than actually being dismantled itself.
Yeah, well, it could be something like it hooks into the bloodstream, but it's not taking the blood and eating the blood. It just runs the blood through its body, filters out all the good stuff, and then sends it back. So the host stays alive for a while, but if you measured the host's blood, they still have the same amount of blood, but it's just depleted.
Well, and the idea that if it's also extracting nutrients, but also oxygen.
Yes, exactly.
Then it could be a fairly quick ordeal that it latches on and the host asphyxiates.
Yes.
Because all of the oxygen and nutrients are being drawn. Yeah, I like that you depicted it. It passes the blood through its body like those surgeries where they pass the blood through like a pig.
Yes. Yep. Okay. It's just a living dialysis that instead of helping takes all of the stuff.
Awful. Oh no. Okay, so our larval Metroid is aquatic, oceanic, freshwater, wherever, drains the nutrients through evil dialysis from prey, eventually finds a host that is some kind of crustacean or insect or creature that is probably some other spooky creature that we haven't invented yet.
Yes, exactly.
Parasitizes them, alters them to have those giant mandibles for presumably getting lots and lots of food, because that's what it needs to do. And then when it's time to move on, induces the growing of the limbs that allows this host to now crawl around on the shallows or out on land to find the next host, which is some sort of lizard-like creature that is the Zeta Metroid, that it then induces with the big mandibles, and then eventually to that final, like, Omega Metroid big scary stage that is maybe big and scary either to defend the nest that is going to be built or build the nest. Or, what if the Omega Metroid stage is there to make a space for a queen to develop?
Yeah. I like that.
Like, it doesn't become the queen, but it provides the area where a new queen will eventually develop.
Yes. Yeah, I like that.
Cool. You gasped in the middle of my explanation, so you came up with something?
It could be parasitizing for those first two stages are Octorok.
I was thinking that. Honestly, it could be parasitizing our Octorok and then our Kremlings.
Yes. Yep.
Which is absolutely horrifying.
I am very happy with all of our Nintendo creatures feeding off of parasitizing and using the body parts of the others.
Yes. So yeah, until further development, we will assume that the alpha and gamma stages are parasitized Octoroks and the Zeta and Omega are parasitized Kremlings. And I'm so sorry to do this to our beloved
our children.
To our children.
Listen, nature's a scary place. It's not called Spook-E for nothing.
And then our Queen Metroid is this giant, monstrous lizard crustacean, which could, if we want, be another host.
Yes.
Otherwise, we do have to develop a big lizard monster that spawns via little Medusa jellyfish creatures.
Yeah. Another host does feel like it makes the most sense just because the anatomy is so vertebrate, is so very, not not barnacle-y at all. It could be one of our dragons.
Oh no, not the dragons. I will say there are, and I don't know a whole lot about this, there are parasites in the real world that have become extra efficient parasites by co-opting genetic material from their hosts.
Oh, yeah.
So the main example that comes to mind is Rafflesia flowers, which are parasitic, and they have a bunch of genetic material from the grapevines that they parasitize that they are presumably using to help them be better at parasitizing, at infiltrating the body of those hosts.
Yes.
So we could invoke some sort of gene transfer mechanism over the years that has allowed the adult form of Metroid to take on some of the attributes of the creatures that it tends to parasitize and use as hosts. So the adult stage maybe is ancestrally something more mollusk-like or crustacean-like, but has developed a bit more of an exoskeleton, a bit more robust body.
Yeah.
By genetically mimicking what its hosts are doing.
Yeah, no, I don't dislike that.
The other option is that the host, the final host that is the queen, is like a dragon that has been infected, and then the membrane underneath it is the adult stage of the Metroid that is creating eggs, and then those eggs are put out and they hatch, which I do quite like that.
Well, and I like that one because then it has the feeling of like, and this is very fitting with the extendy neck and everything, of those caterpillars that get parasitoided by wasps, and then after the larva emerge from the caterpillar, the little maggots eat their way out of the still living caterpillar. The caterpillar then guards the young and uses its own silk it would have used to make a cocoon to help cocoon the baby wasps so that they can develop. And then it sits on top of them and guards them, to where the Queen Metroid would just be a host body for the mature Metroid to be pumping out babies. And the host would just be a defensive creature, and it's just moving, like to maintain temperature when it gets too hot or cold, and if something gets nearby, biting and thrashing and being violent, and not doing much else, maybe not even hunting, if depending on how long the lifespan is.
It would also explain why, if the Queen Metroid swallows you, it can then absorb the energy, because it is literally delivering you to the adult parasite inside.
Yes!
Now, some of our audience out there, sometimes we do spooky stuff and we're like pushing the bounds of reality a little bit, and we're not doing that. But some of you may be thinking to yourselves, well, you're pushing the bounds with 3 completely different life stages, like hosts required for the life cycle. That one, actually? No, we're not.
No.
No, that's a thing that happens. I'm so sorry to reveal this horrifying truth of the world. But no, like we mentioned Lancet Flukes, which we mentioned, I assume, both for the same reason that they were on one of those Animal Planet shows way back in the day. I don't know if it was the most extreme, but it was one of those kinds of shows.
Well, and flukes are really good at this. There's a bunch of different ones that jump multiple, like liver flukes are the ones, one of them are the ones that infect tadpoles, mess with their gene, with the buds where their limbs will grow, and cause them to grow multiple legs and disformed legs so that they can't flee from cranes, who are their actual hosts, where they then go to the liver and feed.
Yep.
I also think it might be some kind of fluke that turns the eye stalks of of a snail into those throbbing maggot looking things.
It's some kind of worm.
Yeah.
Now, I also like the point that you made, that the unnatural strains could be either the parasite just developing oddly in unusual circumstances, but could also be the parasite attempting to parasitize unusual hosts.
Yeah.
That, like, the Metroid Hatcher and the Hopping Metroids could be different types of crustaceans or arthropods or squid or something, that the
Yes.
parasite has gotten into and has either incompletely or partially managed to develop this. It's less of a complex life cycle,
Yes.
but like the Metroid hatchers do spawn new Metroids.
Exactly. So it is good enough.
Yeah, so it could be an alternate pathway that these parasites have taken.
I like that.
And then something, 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 giant crustaceans to give us our Metroid. I guess the Metroid Prime could be like the queen version of one of the... Because like the hopping Metroid is very similar to the Metroid Prime.
Yes, absolutely.
So it could be that in a different environment, it goes through fewer stages, but it does the same thing as the Queen Metroid, but it is a giant crab-like creature. And it could even be one of our giant Octoroks.
Yes, yep.
That it parasitizes and alters into a Metroid Prime.
Well, and it could be one of those things where, like, because, a lot of organisms have very complex development patterns, as, like we've talked about, there are amphibians that can go from larva to adult, and then if conditions aren't right, go back to being a larva. And you see things like that where here's their typical development path. If things aren't great, they go down this development path.
Yes, they use a shortcut.
Yeah, so like Hunter Metroids could be one of those where it's like, if there are no hosts, they just develop into a different adult stage.
Well, and if there's no host that can take them onto land, they end up staying in the water and parasitizing an aquatic host that never goes out onto land or something like that.
Yeah. And I also think it would be cool if it's like they have a different maturity stage that is the larva can develop into a different kind of adult. If there's no host, it can hunt better, and maybe there is a way it can reproduce just less efficiently and less prolifically, but it could still maintain in a body of water where none of its hosts are, hoping for one of them to eventually come along.
Yes. You said Hunter Metroids, and I misinterpreted as the Hatchers.
Oh, yes.
But no, the Hunter Metroids are a perfect, this is just a different adult stage.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned if they can't reproduce efficiently, that could be when you get the splitting Metroids.
Yes, exactly. I forgot they did that. Yes.
That isn't the ideal way to do it, because you're getting less genetic diversity, it's less efficient, it's less numerous. The queen is the ideal, because then you get just a whole nest full of eggs. But if unavailable, they can split their body into two new jellyfish-like Metroids.
Yeah. I also like this whole life cycle because it also explains why the larval stage is tougher than the later stages and has more resistances, because like a lot of larvae super tough because they are super tiny and they need to be able to survive, so that's why you get like eggs and larval phases that have these hard outer coatings, but then when they parasitize something, you can hurt the host.
Well, the host is also malnourished and deformed. Yeah. So yeah, it's way easier to hurt that thing.
So like they're still more vulnerable to cold because the Metroid is now also vulnerable to that, but the animal's vulnerable to everything it would normally be vulnerable to, and it's not quite as resilient, doesn't have that hard protective layer.
Yes. Okay, so a couple of cleanup notes. Number one, spitting fire and electricity and stuff, and acid and such. I do think that you could absolutely make one of the host manipulation things developing like irritating saliva these sort of defensive features.
Or to projectile vomit as a defensive thing if threatened. Of like, listen, you need to keep me alive at all costs, so, barf on them, scratch them, bite them, I don't care. You need to make them go away.
I also think that the vulnerability to cold could be as simple as these animals have an extremely high metabolism.
Yep.
And they are just so reliant on rapid absorption of food and manipulating host by all of this has to happen fairly quickly. And so when they get cold, they slow down. They're like shrews.
Yes.
Where it's like, yeah, if they slow down, they quickly will perish because now they just can't maintain their body and stuff.
Absolutely. I like that a lot.
And finally, there is a legend in the world of Spook-E that once a human was parasitized by one of these parasites and transformed into a horrible monster.
Well, and it could be something where it's like don't pick up toads, it'll give you a wart. Of like, these are well-known parasites within the Spook-E world, and they're like, listen, don't mess with them because you don't want them to latch onto you and turn you into one of their monsters. Like, and even if that's biologically impossible, it's still just this, like, I know that the research says it's not possible. I'm still not gonna, like, I know earwigs don't crawl in my ear. If one was on my pillow, I would still be uncomfortable going to sleep.
Yes.
Like,
well, and I like the idea that if you get a relatively large larva, right? Because again, cat-sized, that's jellyfish-sized.
Yeah.
If you get one that size, it could feed on a person.
Oh yeah,
It
like
absolutely
it
could latch in and drain the nutrients and stuff.
Yeah, like Humboldt squid, where they are not hunting humans, but humans have been attacked by them when they've been in the water while they're feeding, because this is a 3-foot-long squid, and you are not bigger enough for them to not take a bite out of.
Yes. And I guess if we really want to, since we did already invoke the fact that their normal life cycle goes through the crustacean and then lizard and dragon phase, and their alternate life cycle goes through like different cephalopods or gastropods or whatever into the Metroid Prime stage, we could suggest that there has been the beginnings of an alternate direction where humans or some kind of primate is a potential host, and that's how you get your Dark Samus or your Metroid Samus version of it.
Yeah, no, that is a good point.
Awful. This is terrible.
This is so disturbing.
It's funny because for the most part in the Spook-E verse, I'm like, okay, but like, but I mean, they're just animals.
Yes.
Sure, they're scary and they're creepy, but as long as I don't mess with an owlbear, this would make me not want to go to the Spook-E verse.
Yep. No, this I feel so incredibly bad for all the animals that are part of its life cycle. Because this is like, the Lancet flute doing the whole thing of like irritating a snail, so you make me into a slime ball so that ants eat it, so that then they get eaten by a rabbit, and now I get into the rabbit's liver. But the snail is fine. The ant doesn't survive, but the snail's fine. And a lot of parasites have phases like that, where it's like, listen, you're not my main host. I'm going to make you a little sick, but then I'm going to be on my way. You're fine. This one is very much like, no, I'm going to use you up.
Well, and that is in the games when Samus encounters the next life stage. There is always a husk of the former stage left behind.
Yes.
And in the game, the explanation is that this metamorphosed out of that former stage. But for our purposes, it could be that the larva used up the host and moved on to the next host and just left that emaciated husk behind.
Which I love so much, being an Aliens fan, because this has the exact same vibes of when you come to a place where aliens have been and there's a human body there with the chest burst open, and you haven't seen a facehugger, you haven't seen an egg, you haven't seen a xenomorph. That right there means you are in trouble.
Here's the thing that you will greatly appreciate. In Samus Returns, every time you encounter a new life stage of the Metroids, there's a little cutscene.
Yeah.
And the Zeta Metroid cutscene, the one that introduces the Zeta Metroids, Samus walks into the room, kneels down to investigate the husk of a Gamma Metroid, and while she's investigating it, a tail descends from the ceiling behind her in a very overt alien reference.
Because it's... I believe every sci-fi universe should have their own xenomorphs. All right, we've got the Metroids, we've got the Zergs, we've got the Tyranids. I just keep them coming.
And now, so does the Spookyverse.
Yes, it does.
I'm looking at the
so
different
good.
Metroids, and like the Metroid Hatchers could be an infected Kraken from our Kraken episode.
Mm-hmm.
The hopping Metroids could be our Octoroks. I'm sure we've had other crabs that we could. Oh no!
We have unleashed this.
Yeah, we are the Chozo, and this is what we have unleashed onto the world.
We are the unethical bird people.
The galaxy is not at peace. Listeners, I'm so sorry.
Yes,
for what we have done. This, I'm utterly delighted. This is fantastic.
I for the first time ever, I am a little intimidated to see what art people potentially make of this, because it's going to be disturbing.
It's going to be the worst fan art since the Vampire Shrews.
And I'm so excited.
Listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this half as much as Will and I have enjoyed this conversation. This has been phenomenal. This has been the 4th and final episode of Spook-E for this year's October, but spooky season is not yet over, because the first weekend in November, we will be releasing our bonus Cute-E episode, which promises to be way less disturbing than this episode. We will pick one final Nintendo creature to speculatively evolve, but this time not a monstrous one, but a cute one. If you haven't already, check out the previous episodes of this year's Spook-E and previous year's Spook-E. If you have thoughts and ideas and opinions, or just appalled reactions, head over to our Discord and join the Spook-E channel. You can also find us on the social medias. You can send us an email, go to our website, find all those things. If you are one of those very talented people who likes to use our Spook-E discussions as inspiration for artwork, please feel free to share it with us. We love to put those. Sometimes we'll put them on our website. We'll share them on social media and the Discord. Send it to us and tell us how you'd like to be credited if we end up using it. We love to see the fan art that our fans art.
Very much so. I'm so excited.
What a year. What a year this Spook-E has been so far.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster.
It sure has. Remember last episode where we were just developing like cartoonish, mooky lizard people?
Some smart lizards who like to climb trees and eat fruits. What funky guys.
Bleh. Oh man, the Metroid core form could even be another alternate adult version.
Oh yeah.
The larval. Oh no. Ooh, hate. No, that's like it's like a neotenic Metroid larva that has retained its mostly gelatinous appearance, but it spawns new larvae because it is reproductive. No, hate.
Yep.
Nope. I hate all of this. This is the worst.
The entire time we've been having this discussion, I'm just picturing that one image of the crab barnacle where it's just throbbing and pulsating and just roiling under the crab, and that's been in my brain the entire time we've been having this discussion.
Listeners, please share your reactions to this episode with us and join us for the refreshing reprieve of Cute-E next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.